welcome to our channel. Today, we embark on a fascinating journey into the Soviet system, exploring its eventual disintegration and the profound consequences that unfolded thereafter. The Union of Soviet Socialist Republics came into existence after the Socialist Revolution in Russia in 1917. The Soviet political system revolved around the Communist Party and featured state control over the economy. However, a combination of internal weaknesses and external pressures eventually led to the downfall of the USSR. Let's start by delving into the establishment of the USSR in 1917, following the Socialist Revolution in Russia. Its primary objective was to create an egalitarian socialist society where resources and wealth would be collectively shared rather than privately owned. Under the Soviet system, the government owned and managed major industries and resources, forming the cornerstone of a state-controlled economy. Additionally, the Soviet Union led the Socialist Bloc, a group of countries under Soviet influence. The state provided subsidies for basic necessities to ensure a minimum standard of living for its citizens. However, the Soviet system was characterized by bureaucratic and authoritarian tendencies, featuring limited democracy and restrictions on freedom of speech. Moving forward, in the 1980s, Mikhail Gorbachev, as the General Secretary of the Communist Party of the Soviet Union, implemented reforms to modernize the Soviet system. His policies aimed to address economic stagnation and introduce political openness and transparency. Gorbachev's initiatives, known as Glasnost and Perestroika, inadvertently exposed the failures and corruption of the Soviet regime. As a result, widespread protests erupted, leading to the collapse of communist regimes in countries like Poland, Hungary, East Germany, and Czechoslovakia. The fall of the Berlin Wall in 1989 symbolized the end of Soviet influence in Eastern Europe and further accelerated the disintegration of the USSR itself. A pivotal moment in the Soviet Union's history occurred in 1991 when a failed coup attempt by hardliners against Gorbachev's government marked a turning point. Boris Yeltsin, the president of the Russian Federation, emerged as a key figure in thwarting the coup, resulting in a shift of power from the Soviet center to the individual republics. The Soviet political and economic institutions had internal weaknesses that contributed to their downfall. These weaknesses included economic stagnation, misallocation of resources, lack of accountability, corruption, slow administration, and privileges for party bureaucrats. Such factors alienated the population and fostered disillusionment. The state-controlled economy failed to keep pace with the West, resulting in stagnant growth and shortages. Bureaucratic inefficiencies, widespread corruption, and a lack of transparency further undermined the system, eroding public trust and exacerbating economic and political challenges. Gorbachev's reforms, aimed at addressing these internal weaknesses, inadvertently sparked a rise in nationalism and desires for sovereignty among various republics. This, coupled with growing tensions and divided public opinion, ultimately contributed to the disintegration of the USSR. The collapse of the Soviet Union marked the end of Cold War confrontations, resulting in a shift in power relations that established the United States as the sole superpower and the dominant force in the global political and economic landscape. The collapse of the Soviet Union led to the dominance of the capitalist economic system, with the United States emerging as the leading capitalist power. This shift also brought about the emergence of liberal democracy as the favored governance system, emphasizing individual rights, political freedoms, and market-based economies as the preferred approach to organizing societies. The collapse of the Soviet Union resulted in the formation of new countries, each facing unique economic and political challenges as they sought to define their aspirations, establish their identities, and navigate the complexities of the post-Soviet world. Now let's explore the concept of shock therapy in the aftermath of the Soviet Union's collapse. Shock therapy refers to the rapid transition from an authoritarian socialist system to a democratic capitalist system. It involves swift and comprehensive economic and political reforms, including the privatization of state assets, the introduction of free market principles, and the adoption of democratic governance structures. During the implementation of shock therapy, there is a strong emphasis on private ownership, where state-owned assets are swiftly privatized, allowing them to be owned and operated by individuals or private entities. Additionally, there is a shift towards free trade, with reduced barriers and increased international economic integration, promoting open markets and competition. However, shock therapy had negative consequences for many post-communist countries. The abrupt transition to a capitalist system resulted in the disappearance of industries, high inflation, erosion of savings due to currency devaluation, food insecurity, and the widening of economic disparities. These challenges caused significant hardships for the population, leading to economic ruin and social unrest. Moreover, the transition period often neglected the building of democratic institutions in post-communist countries, resulting in the concentration of power in the hands of strong executive presidents and weak parliaments. In some Central Asian countries, this led to the rise of authoritarian tendencies, curtailing dissent and opposition. The disintegration of the USSR also unleashed conflicts, civil wars, and insurgencies in former Soviet republics. These conflicts ranged from violent secessionist movements to sectarian clashes, demands for secession, and movements against existing regimes. The instability caused by these conflicts hindered political and economic development in the region. It's worth noting that outside powers, including Russia, the United States, and China, have been involved in the conflicts of former Soviet republics. Russia considers these states as part of its sphere of influence, while the United States sought military bases in Central Asia following the 9/11 attacks. China, driven by its interests in oil resources, has established its presence along borders and engaged in trade in the region. Given India's strong relations with post-communist countries, particularly its close ties with Russia, it has maintained a significant role in the region. These relations are built on trust, common interests, and shared perceptions, benefiting both countries in various areas such as defense, energy, and regional cooperation. India and Russia share a vision of a multipolar world order, emphasizing the coexistence of multiple powers and collective security. They have signed over 80 bilateral agreements, strengthening cooperation in areas such as defense, energy supplies, counterterrorism, and access to Central Asia. Russia is India's second-largest arms market, providing crucial military hardware. Additionally, Russia has supported India during oil crises, ensuring stable energy supplies. The two countries maintain a strategic partnership in defense and energy sectors, enhancing their bilateral cooperation. In this video, we have explored the causes and consequences of the disintegration of the Soviet system. The Soviet Union aimed to create an egalitarian socialist society, but ultimately became bureaucratic and authoritarian, lacking in democracy and freedom of speech. Gorbachev's reforms, intended to address internal weaknesses, inadvertently sparked protests and the collapse of communist regimes in Eastern Europe. The collapse of the USSR had far-reaching consequences, including a shift in global power dynamics, the dominance of capitalist economic systems, and the emergence of liberal democracy as the preferred governance system. New countries emerged, each facing unique challenges in their pursuit of economic and political stability. Thank you for watching. If you found this video informative, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more content like this.